Hi guys, with so much talk these days about anxiety and depression often being mentioned in the same breath as if they're the same thing or at least manifest as a pair, things can get pretty confusing. In this video, I'll explain why these two completely different responses often get grouped together and how, in the midst of it all, we can clearly distinguish between the two so we understand what's going on a little bit better. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear picture of the key differences between anxiety and depression, and as a result, have some better strategies on board for dealing with and managing your own mental health. I'm Tim Box, Mind Coach, and this is Anxiety and Depression, What's Really Going On? So welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time, I'm Tim Box, I'm a mind coach, and for the last 12 years or so, I've been working with people to help them overcome all sorts of emotional and psychological issues, and in particular, helping people to get control of anxiety. If you want to support my efforts to help, then please leave a like on this video, and why not subscribe for mind coaching and anxiety advice videos every week. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, the first thing to say in this video is that when I work with people, I am not a diagnostic practitioner. What that means is that I don't tell people what's wrong with them or label them with certain conditions or disorders. We'll leave diagnosis and medication to the doctors and the psychiatrists. Clients tend to come to me with an existing diagnosis, and I work with them to help them get past the limits that label has put on their thinking. My aim is to help people get beyond their diagnosis and managing their own mental health and emotional well-being to the point where they can once again be happy. So I'm always going to start by saying we're not here to diagnose a condition. What we are here to do is to help you understand your own responses and demystify the labels we might get given. We don't have to be constrained by our pre-existing misconceptions about what the words anxiety and depression actually mean. I work on the principle that understanding is the antidote. It's understanding what's going on up here that helps us get control of it. This video was inspired by a discussion I had with a friend and colleague of mine, Howard Cooper, who does a very similar job to what I do. And by the way, when you get a minute, head over to his YouTube channel for more fantastic real-world advice on anxiety. I'll put a link in the description below. He was talking to me recently about a conversation he had with someone where they were saying that the difference between anxiety and depression is that anxiety is all about the future and depression is all about the past. Now, I understand why someone might look at things this way. After all, depression very often involves reflection on distressing times in our life or traumatic events from our past. Anxiety often involves spending a lot of time and energy anticipating possible disasters and predicting what challenges the future might bring. However, both anxiety and depression have much more in common than that, because both of these responses are about our past and our future. We feel anxious because something that we've been through has damaged our own perception of our ability to cope with life's challenges. Based on our understanding of past experiences, we now find ourselves feeling more vulnerable than we previously did. Similarly, depression is caused by events in the past, leading us to conclude that there is no happiness out there in our future. They both have their origins in past events, yet the way we feel is based on what we imagine the future holds. So anxiety and depression do have a common ground, and yet they are very different responses. Yet their differences aren't really about the past or the future, they're about how they manifest in the present. Anxiety is, put simply, an overwhelm of emotion, and depression is an absence of it. To explain this better, we perhaps need to define our terms a little. Anxiety is often inaccurately defined as simply a fear of the future. Now, fear itself could be described as that in-the-moment response to danger, the discomfort we feel in a current threatening situation that is encouraging us to move away from it. Anxiety gets described as the anticipation of future danger. Fear is something that might or might not happen. This is often why anxiety gets a bit of a bad rap, because we're responding to something that isn't happening right now, as if it actually is. Anxiety is often perceived to be an entirely mistaken response and hence treated as a malfunction of some kind. But anxiety is much more functional than that. It's much more productive to think of anxiety as simply a part of your mind trying to get your attention. That attention might be designed to encourage you away from the future event, or it might be designed to inspire you to prepare for it adequately so you can handle it. Anxiety is the emotion your mind uses to put your conscious focus on whatever seems to be the most important and pressing issue right now. And this is why anxiety often manifests as an overwhelm of emotion. It's too many parts of our mind all jostling for attention, disagreeing on what the most important thing is right now, all trying to monopolize that limited conscious focus. By contrast, and perhaps this is the real difference between anxiety and depression, depression is an absence of emotion. It's less a sadness and more a numbness. It's the point where your mind has largely given up on triggering any feelings that might be designed to steer you towards or away from anticipated situations, because there's no perceived positive benefit to taking that action. Depression isn't just feeling really sad. It isn't just feeling sad when circumstances don't warrant it. It's more like that point where we are so low that we can no longer see a path to future happiness. It's probably more accurate to describe it as the point where we conclude that there is no happiness out there. It manifests in the present as a numbness. In practical terms, what that means is that coming out of depression doesn't require getting to the point where we're in a happy situation, leading a happy life. It doesn't even require the ability to see the path to happiness, even though we haven't got there yet. The path out of depression starts when we accept and believe in the concept that somewhere, somehow, there is happiness out there. That's when we start to feel again, when feelings once again have a purpose. We might not be in the light right now, we might not even see the light in the distance to move towards, but if we can know that there is a light out there and accept the possibility that it could be found, our mind can start looking again. This is why diagnosing ourselves based on how we feel compared to others is ultimately futile. Knowing whether or not what we're going through officially qualifies as anxiety or depression is of very little practical value. What anxiety or depression feel like is different for every single person. It's more about what those feelings mean to us as an individual. So if we're describing anxiety as an overwhelm of emotion and depression as a shortage of it, on the face of it, those two responses don't really seem compatible. So how come they get grouped together so often? How come some people experience both? Now, I touched on this point in a recent video about mental health myths, which I'll link to in the description. The reason we sometimes experience bouts of anxiety and depression almost simultaneously is that often one can be the architect of the other. The most common story here is that for whatever reason, we begin to experience regular high anxiety levels. This then starts to invade into our everyday activities and becomes the main point of focus for us on a daily basis. Anxiety begins to close off our options as we begin to doubt our ability to cope with even the simplest and most basic daily activities. Before we know it, our life has become only a small portion of what it previously was. The way anxiety puts up no entry signs on activities we previously enjoyed causes our world to shrink down to what feels like nothing. When this goes on for too long, this inevitably leads us towards a depressive outlook, where we've become closed off to our favourite experiences like going out with friends or travelling or just driving to the store or going for a walk. We might inevitably make the mistake of thinking this is now our lot in life and this is all we have to look forward to in the future. The moment where we give up on the idea of any future happiness is the point that anxiety gives rise to depression. However, this can also work the other way round. The thing about depression is that when we've experienced bouts of low feeling and intense sadness for protracted periods of time, we very often get to the point where we're no longer aware of why we still feel low. Maybe the situation or event that triggered it is long gone and we now can't perceive any logical reason why we should still be down. Those days when we wake and feel that sadness invading our mood can cause us great anxiety about whether we'll ever really move on from those negative feelings and thoughts. Because there seems no tangible reason for it, we conclude the reason is because there's something wrong with us, and this inevitably gives rise to anxiety about our own mental health. This collateral anxiety isn't limited to depression. Any issues we have with our emotional well-being can cause us escalated anxiety as we start to doubt whether or not we can ultimately find a way out. This is why anxiety and depression often get mentioned in the same breath, because one often causes the other. However, this is only because we're dealing with human emotions here, and when threat and challenge arises, we are none of us immune to potentially going through times of emotional struggle in the face of it. However, it's worth pointing out here that in the majority of cases, people only have to deal with one of these at a time. Becoming anxious doesn't automatically lead to depression, and by the same token, depression doesn't always cause anxiety. It's more common for us to experience just one of these issues, and even in those cases where we're experiencing both, the solution usually comes from working on which one of those two came up first, as it's very probably what caused the other. So, Fixing the cause eliminates the effect. The final thing I want to say here is that when we're seeking a mental health diagnosis, it's very tempting to fall into a medical model of how we think about this stuff. We're kind of looking for the equivalent of a blood test that tells us exactly what our illness is so we can start to get treatment. I understand that. If we know what's wrong, we can take steps to put it right. However, I would encourage us to think about things less prescriptively. We are all human beings and our mental state changes from moment to moment. We're not locked into any diagnosis because our emotional responses are far more transient and complex than a simple set of symptoms. The truth is, you don't have anxiety or depression. Mental health isn't something that happens to us. It's what our mind does in response to our situation and our experiences. If we spend less energy managing our perceived mental illness and more time managing our day-to-day emotional well-being, we'll experience a far greater degree of control over the way we think, feel, and behave. And most importantly, we won't be constrained by the limitations of any diagnosis. Guys, I hope this video has been of value. If you have any questions, then put them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer all of them. Please hit that thumbs up button if you like what I do, and why not subscribe to the channel for weekly mind management tips and anxiety advice. But that's it for now. I'm Timbox, Mind Coach. Remember to always be kind to your mind, and I'll see you next time.